Here, I took myself away.
All right. Okay. This is our 4th edition, Finding the Ways of Your World and World Building Your Novel. Okay. This was taken from a 30 Days of World Building that I found online several years ago and adapted from it. The link is on the last slide, just so that we put that out there in the beginning.
Susie put out a note about leaving our faces on, but the problem is sometimes that makes our faces right over something that's...
Yep. Well, that's not on the screen anyway, but okay.
Yeah, except I'm seeing...
You're seeing it both. Yeah, it's on top of our
I'm seeing Dory and I'm seeing Susie.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing any of them.
And I'm seeing all three. No, that's weird. Because I'm seeing you and I'm seeing Dory and I'm seeing Susie.
Let's see what it.
she says she says she sees all of us.
Yep.
Well, let's see. Okay. Now, Dory, can you hear? Oh, she can still.
Yeah, she can still hear.
She can.
I can see.
Okay. Okay.
Yep, everything's good.
Okay. So in world building, things that we need to consider, things that you don't really think about, like how much is salami in Moscow? What do you get when you order a hamburger in Slovenia? Where do you buy Tylenol in Australia and what do they call it? Just a little tip, it's not Tylenol.
Yeah.
What's the price of tea in China? And what do you get if you order a hamburger in Spain? These really don't matter to us in our general lives, but if you're in Spain, you want to know what you're going to get if you order a hamburger. If you're setting a story in Australia and you need a painkiller, if you call it Tylenol, the people from there are going to go, oh, that's not right. What's Tylenol?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes your story seem a little richer, a little more accurate to know the details of the particular world you're looking at.
So salami in Moscow is 1,000 rubles a kilogram, which is $14 in our money, and that's for 2.2 pounds. I think that's not too bad of a price, actually.
It really isn't. Salami here runs about $6 to $7 a pound, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, I think I looked at one that I ordered and I thought, well, it's pretty close to the same price, but it's still good to know. Like that in Slovenia, your hamburger will be horse meat.
And in Australia, they don't have drugstores. They call it the chemist, and you're looking for paracetamol.
And I was reading a book by an English author set in England, and I think it was England. Maybe it was New Zealand, and they called it paracetamol. So I thought,
Yep.
Oh, I know, that's Tylenol.
Yep.
The price of tea in China varies from a few US dollars per gram to hundreds and even thousands of dollars per gram, depending on the type of tea. So if you were going to talk about tea in China, you better know if you can afford it, I guess, if you're going to put it in your book, or you better look for a kind that is affordable.
Yep.
Not just like ours, we go in and buy a tea bag at the store.
Yep. And hamburgers or meat patties in Spain are a mixture of pork and beef. Pork is the meat of choice in Spain, making the combination perfect one for the Spanish version of a hamburger. I believe in France, a hamburger is a ham sandwich, literally. A slice of ham.
That could very well be. Would make more sense, I guess, in lots of ways.
Yep.
Although I think hamburgers were named after a place, not the meat.
probably, which I believe is a German place, isn't it?
Yeah, or it may have even been a German person whose name was Hamburger. I don't know. But there is a place called, yeah, in Germany.
German, there is a city called Hamburg.
So, yeah.
So
But
details matter. That's the whole point in that.
yeah,
Details
details
matter.
matter. I can see somebody in Slovenia from the United States ordering a hamburger, finding out it's horse meat and getting very upset.
Yes.
You were writing a story, but it would make an interesting scene, probably.
Yes, because we
We
have
don't
this
eat- we don't-
cultural thing against eating horse meat. Yeah.
That's right.
So
We have like against some other things too that other, we don't eat much goat, although I think there is a little more because we've gotten a few more cultures here that do eat it, but
goat and sheep both. It is a thing. It's not. It doesn't have the taboo that eating horse does. It's just not something that we eat a ton of.
Yeah.
So
well, we don't raise horses to eat, whereas even sheep and goats, they are more
and yeah,
like cattle. Yeah.
they are more like horses are more pets, and it started when they were your main method of transportation.
Right. Yeah.
So, next is physical planet. Does your planet have one climate, like Tatooine from Star Wars, that whole sand planet, or does it have several, like the surface, over the surface, like the Earth? How many suns and moons, and how do they affect your climate? Do you have mountains, oceans, wildlife? Things to start considering as you look at building your world for your story.
I like this picture. I think it's Neptune, which I don't think I
Oh.
realized Neptune had rings around it, but obviously it does have some. And I like this picture because it was blue. And I thought, oh, if you were writing about a planet, would it be fun to make it blue?
It would be that you
A
would
different
think that
color.
would have a lot of water, but not necessarily. It could be just the type of gases in the atmosphere.
Yeah, or the minerals that form the soil.
Yep. Climate and variety. Where is your story set? Is it a desert planet or a tropical jungle, a bustling city or a desolate camp? What's the temperature like? What's the weather like? What kind of storms do they get? Is it rain, wind, sand, tornadoes, hurricanes, snow, blizzards? What kind of thing do you get? Because if it was just pleasant weather all the time, that's boring. And how much light or sun do they get? And how much moisture do they get? Things to consider.
You had those ones where they have a planet with two suns, and so it gets, depending on it would get obviously more light, I guess, but it would obviously get light in a different way.
Yeah, and if they're on different patterns like the sun and moon, you would think the days that the two suns are both up, that would be significantly hotter.
Could be, or just it would depend on their positioning. Certainly something you'd have to think about if you were going to decide to do that.
Yeah, if they're on the same orbit, that's the word I couldn't think of.
Yeah. Well, even if they were on the same orbit, if they were in different positions on the orbit, it would change the way your days went.
It would.
Geography. In all the planning you've done, has the look of your planet changed? Does it need to in order to accommodate something you've planned? Certainly, this is always something that I think people that write fantasy and sci-fi have to really think about. And once they finish their story, they have to, like I said, if you've got two suns and different positions on the orbit, how does that change the way your planet's going to look? And you have to think about that.
Exactly. Now, these are designed so that you take 15, 20 minutes a day and do one step a day. So by the time you get 10, 12 days into it, things that you start planned on for day one may not work anymore. That's kind of what this is designed for. Do things need to change in order to accommodate something that you've come up with in the last week or 2 weeks or things like that?
Yeah, I always think of this, and I'm sure it's just somewhere, one of our deserts, but I always think about Dune, I think it is, because I think Dune has, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't have this kind of a look to it, but
I think it did. And I want to say this was not taken all that far from us, probably out in the sand dunes outside of Yuma.
Could very well been, yeah. Certainly looks a lot like out there.
It
But
does.
there's also when you go over to New Mexico, you see the White Sands area. Now this looks more gray, but that could be the light. But when you
It
go over
could
there,
be.
that
It,
area is that way too.
yeah, it could also be the Sahara. So there's a lot of places it could be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always remember the desert scenes in Lawrence of Arabia.
Yep. I'll have to look and see where that was filmed because that had not occurred to me.
Mood in the setting. Is there war and chaos? Is it peaceful, easygoing, happy time? Why is this important?
No.
This is actually a picture from the Civil War.
That's what I thought. I was going to say this looks like Union or Confederate. These are obviously with the dark blue. Those are going to be
Yeah,
Union.
it looks like Union soldiers, but it's from the Confederate War or the Civil War. And, it's if war is going on, then what's going on with the people changes too. There's all
Yeah.
kinds of things that happen. Obviously, a lot of men get killed and people are in grief from losing loved ones, but there's also, if you look back to World War II, there was gas rationing, there was rationing of other food products, and people were saving up things for the war effort, like metal and
Doing
stuff.
jobs they'd never done before.
People did jobs, yeah, women certainly did jobs they'd never done before. So all of those things, all of what is going on in your world affects what happens to your characters.
And how they react to each thing.
Yeah. And also you think about those are things you can use, in your story.
Yep. The recent history, along with the times, is it set during wartime or was there recently a war and you're in recovery? A fiscal depression, rapid industrial change, a pandemic. We're all dealing with that now. We know what changes that deals with. This is actually pictures from the
from the Spanish
1919,
flu.
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's from the Spanish flu, yes. Yeah, I actually added the pandemic. I figured it's going on, that we should think what has changed with us. And if we write a story that's set in 2020, or probably even 2021, it's a lot of what's going on is going to affect us and probably even affect us after for a while.
Yep. And like we said before, the things that are happening around them will affect the way your characters react to situations. It's just human nature. Cataclysms. Is your planet or setting prone to earthquakes, volcanoes? You're not going to limit this to natural disasters. It could include any big event that kills or terrorizes a large number of people and would affect the world's an area's history. One that occurs to me is meteors striking the Earth. That's cataclysmic, but it would also be, even a small one would make things in the area change.
Right. And one that always, when I think about it, I read a book by Simon Winchester called Krakatoa.
Mm-hmm.
And it told about when the island of Krakatoa, when it blew up, the volcano in there blew up the island, and how for about 3 years it affected the temperature of the earth. And they were seeing beautiful sunsets, I think on the East Coast, if I remember right, but I'd have to read the book again. But I remember them talking about artists, I think, that were seeing how the sunsets had changed. I mean, the ash in the air makes for actually a very colorful sunset. So.
And we know that from the recent fires in California and across the country. The
Right.
smoke and the ash in the air and it changes the temperatures. Here 6 weeks ago in Arizona, we had all of that smoke that dropped our temperatures from 110 down to 90. Yeah. A lot of things will affect the local area, what scares people, and that affects your characters as well.
And I had to include our friendly little virus because it's affecting,
Yes.
as have others in the past.
Yes. Economy and politics. Do your people live in a democracy, a republic, a monarchy? Is it a good or evil government? Are people trying to overthrow the system? Are the people happy and well off, or do they live in poverty or somewhere in between?
Yeah, we can look back on, probably if I was to go back and read a little bit more Russian fiction, we would get a little bit more about what was going on. I know there's a lot of stuff going on with the czars in Russia way back when. And obviously, during the times of Stalin and Lenin, there's a lot of things going on there as well. We would probably see some of a lot of that as evil, but some of the czars were not as evil as others. And of course,
And then look at East and West Germany during the 70s and 80s.
right. Yeah. And, I look at the geography I look at the world map and I know names have changed in a lot of them too. And some of them are, I think, because new countries have formed, but some of them are, they just gave them, a new name because of.
New people in power, we've changed the way we run things. We want a new name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Flora and the fauna. What do the plants and animals of your world look like? What do they smell like? Are they aggressive? Are they edible? Food source for your people? How aggressive are they?
And the aggressive does not just apply to the animals. Think your flycatcher,
Yeah, the Venus flytrap.
Venus flytrap, to scale. You can have very aggressive plants that eat people if you want. Sky's the limit.
Is it the play Little Shop of Horrors?
Yep.
Where the plant grows and becomes very aggressive.
It becomes very carnivorous. Yeah.
Yeah, very carnivorous.
So, and it's just start thinking about those. What do you want? What kind of thing works? And I love the picture. That's the alien creature,
Yeah,
right?
that's from the Alien, yes. That's a pretty aggressive creature in your world, that one. I mean, you think back to our early prehistory and with all the dinosaurs and things, and some of the early animals, even for our very early ancestors, Neanderthal men and whatever, they had to deal with some critters that were pretty vicious.
There were, and not all of them are gone. We still have some dinosaur era creatures that we deal with that are pretty vicious and aggressive. Think alligator, crocodile, Komodo dragon.
Yeah, right. Well, even when we think about lions and tigers, and that they're saber-toothed tigers they're the descendants of those, so
Yeah.
yeah. At least we don't have any of those flying reptiles.
Oh, like pterodactyl?
We don't have any of those around.
Yeah. Okay, consider the races in your story. If your setting is fantasy or sci-fi, do you have varied races? If you're setting a realish place, what's the racial diversity in the area? Wikipedia actually has a lot of demographic information that'll help you find this. I've used it a lot when I'm setting in real and even fake places, because even cities that I've made up have in my head a general area where they're actually located. So I just use Wikipedia information and demographics from there.
Right. Yeah, it's good to know, what's the makeup of a city or even of a state. Depending on how your country feels, and it could be the country. I think you're probably more likely to be looking at a city, or even even if you look at Yuma and you say, okay, what's our percentage of Caucasian or Hispanic? We know we got a heavy Hispanic. We don't have very many Blacks here. We have the Native Americans. There's some obviously Asians. And you can look up all those things and see what the percentage is and then decide how that fits into your story.
Yep, and the Wikipedia stats come from census information, so they're They're reliably accurate.
And
Right.
they'll be changing probably
Yep.
next year.
Next couple of years, yeah. There's sometimes I take Wikipedia with a grain of salt because anyone can change things, but the information on demographics is fairly accurate because it comes out of census information, and they do cite.
Yeah. Education. Oops. Now I got your picture in the way I can't read that top line.
And this is, how do your characters learn? Do they have a traditional school? Do they learn electronically at home? How much schooling does your typical person have? Is it 6th grade, 8th grade, high school equivalent, graduate or postgraduate equivalent? Is your main character typical? Do they have more or less education than those around them? And how they interact with the world is going to vary based on how much education, how they receive their education, and things like that.
And this was a very current picture. And
oh yeah,
if in 10 years someone's writing about 2020 and they're writing about education, they're going to have to think about the fact that a lot of the kids were going to school online.
Yep. Mood and culture. Family or individual focus. This is not something we really think a huge amount about, but in the US, our culture has more of an individual focus, where a lot of other countries, specifically what comes to mind is like Japan and Mexico. What is best for you means less than what's better for the family. We do it because that's what the family expects. This is what the family does. That's a lot of mindset. That's not how we think of things in the US. So think about what you want for your culture. Are you focused on industry or arts? What are some of the traditions of your settings, including dances, holidays, seasonal events? Do you have like solstice celebrations, that kind of thing?
And I would say probably why, and I understand using like Japan or Mexico for choices, because their populations still are primarily Japanese and Mexican, whereas we're a country of so many different cultures, and amongst that, I even are European, because you have people from Scotland and Ireland and Germany, and even each of those has their own, and Italy and all those. So each of those has their own little
culture,
individual culture. And I think that's why we are so focused on being more individual
than family focused.
Than one culture, yeah, the family culture or whatever.
Languages. Do you have one language or many in your story, in your world? Are you creating them, or are they known languages? What's the difference in languages between your lower and upper class? I know I've mentioned it more than a few times, and maybe not in this, but Lord of the Rings was written as a background for the language that he'd already created.
Right. You can create a language. The other thing I would say about when you're using a language is be careful. If you're using it along with, many times when I'm reading a book and it has a lot of another language in it, I tend to skip over it.
I get that, yep.
There are certain phrases that I can figure out just from having taken Latin and knowing enough of it, and to the Romance languages, you can kind of figure out what they're saying. And some of it are familiar phrases that we see all the time, in our everyday life. So they're not hard when you see them. But if you put too much in, I think it can get confusing.
It can be confusing. It can pull them out of the story so that they lose something.
Right.
Maps. Are you using a place that already exists? And if your setting is not a real place, do you need to draw a map? The maps are very common in fantasy, and actually there's a huge percentage of readers that will open a book, and if there's not a map, they will not buy it. This is mainly fantasy, but it does happen. And aside from the readers, will a map help you visualize your story? I had one particular story that I had to draw out a floor plan of, and it wasn't really a floor plan, but a map of the apartment complex, just so I knew where they were moving around.
Yeah, yeah. I think the writing book I've been reading, he kind of talks a little bit about that, doing that. This map is kind of interesting. I don't remember if it's Munich or where it is, but these were maps that the Allies used to figure out what they were going to bomb during World War II.
I was going to say, so this is a World War II era map.
This is a World War II era map. Yeah, when I went looking for different kinds of maps, I came across these. I thought, well, it would be an interesting one to include in our presentation. I didn't ever think about the fact, although I guess it makes sense that they would have looked at it and tried to avoid, obviously they're looking for places where things were manufactured, that kind of thing, and trying to stay away from some more of the people.
Yeah,
So
you're going to go after factories, airfields, strategic targets, and leave mostly your residential areas alone.
I don't know how much of that really happened because I don't know that they had perfected yet the science of how much they're affected by their air when they're coming down, how much wind there is and all that kind of thing. But
yeah,
but they tried.
There's the try.
Yeah, we know they were going after, but a lot of times they didn't. I thought it was interesting. They showed on television yesterday, I think it was, where a World War II bomb blew up. It was in the water off Poland, or in a water that was connected to Poland. I'm trying to think. Poland's not on the ocean, is it? But it might have been some kind of. Anyway, this bomb had blown up. These people were doing some underwater work and somehow set off this bomb from World War II. Put off quite the geyser went off. And they said something about there's like 2,500 probably bombs out there yet from World War II that haven't exploded.
That reminds me of the old tales of going fishing with dynamite.
Oh yeah, my relatives used to do that.
Oh, mine did too.
And it works.
It does. Gather your resources. Your references. Do you have your map handy? Do you need a floor plan for the house? Do you need a family tree to keep your characters straight? And do you have your rules handy? This was just designed as a day to make sure you have everything all in one place. You don't have it scattered, so that when you begin to write, you have all the information you need, easily accessible. A 3-ring binder would be a great place to keep it, or even just a folder so that you know it's all in one place and you can find it when you need it.
Yeah, I tend to put my stuff in a 3-ring folder, you know, and even my character maps and things about them, and
Yep. I personally tend to use a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I know you use a spreadsheet.
So I can pop it up on a dual screen next to me, so I can just glance back and forth and pull up what I need.
Yeah.
That's what I tend to do.
Yeah, I keep my character maps, and another thing I'll keep is I will usually go to whatever year it is that I'm have the setting in, and I'll go print off, like I said, what were the top 100 books, the 100 movies, the most popular songs, maybe who was the president, those kind of things. Any big thing that happened in that year, I'll print those and I'll put those into and sometimes I like just, if my character is a Cancer, I want to print what Cancer is about and put that in there, because maybe I'll want to use that in my character development somewhere along the way.
Yep. What if? A lot of stories need what if elements, whether you're going to call it a speculative element or a fantasy element. Give it something unique to your story. What if there are dragons? What if dogs could talk? What if one character can read minds? What if everyone can read minds? What if one person has a memory that only lasts 60 seconds? And I believe the name of this movie was 50 First Dates.
That is 50 First Dates.
Yes. And then what if that speculative element is often something, it's a good idea for a story. One of my first ones was, what if a woman discovers that shapeshifters exist and she is one? And so that started the whole thing.
Yeah, well, that's like the the story I've been editing. My what if is, what if a character that's supposedly brain dead still has something there?
Okay. Which is a little bit of a paranormal thing too.
Yep, it is definitely. Yeah, that's a little bit, yeah, it kind of fits into the rest of the paranormal element.
Yep.
But yeah.
Spec and society. How does your what if, your special things, fit into the rest of the society you've created? And how do they interact with normal people? Assuming there are normal people. Are there even normal people? Or does everyone have some what if element? And how does it affect how your people react to different situations?
And I included here, this is a picture from a new television series called Ice Piercer, I think. All the people, the world is encased in ice, and these people are surviving on a big, long train.
Okay.
But it's got, what's happened is there's very definite sections of, there's the ruling people on the train, there's the well-off people, then there's the security people, and then there's kind of the in-between people, and then there's this group that kind of were the poor people that snuck on the train, that are really away from where the food is and all that kind of thing, and they're kind of
So there's definitely a class structure on here.
there's a definite class structure. Pardon me.
Okay.
Oh, I thought it was a good picture that, you know, this is a society all in one small place. And
Yeah.
and I know in this particular group, the lady in the blue, she's kind of she's the, no, you can't say exactly a ruling class, but she's the lady who runs the train. The blonde lady is security. The man of the dreadlocks is one of the ones that got on there in the back of the train. And I'm not sure who's showing up here in the front, but there's definitely a very special society in this group.
Okay. The limits of spec. What are the rules of your world? How far are you willing to go? Are there vampires but no shapeshifters? What is the cost of special things? So, for example, you have a guy who can teleport himself, but he can only do it once a day. And then, or, you know, he can shapeshift, but he falls asleep for 4 hours.
Right.
What is your technology? What is
Right.
the cost, and what are the limits? You need limits of one kind of or another, or things can just change, especially mid-story. Not that changing mid-story is bad. You just have to go back and fix it.
Saying all that reminds me, and if I'd have thought of it at the time, Quantum Leap, a picture from Quantum Leap would have been here,
Yeah.
because there was the rule when he went, he couldn't really control where he was going and whose body he was going to turn up in.
And in the beginning, he could only leap into his own lifetime. And then he was struck, the place was struck by lightning mid-season. I was a big Quantum Leap fan.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I was a big fan too.
Well, at some point in mid-leap, they were struck by lightning, and he and Al switched places. So he jumped out of his lifetime, but in Al's lifetime.
Oh, and Al was older than him. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so there was that. And
they did go in, he did end up in all different people, but different time frames too, you know. He
yes.
could be, as long as it was, like you said, within his
within his own lifetime. Yeah.
So that's one of those that's one of the limits. I always remember, I think it was Irv saying that, you know, if you made a rule, make sure you stuck to it. You know, you can make, if you're going to have a speculative world, you can make a rule, but make sure you stick with it and don't be changing in midstream.
Yep.
Yeah, don't change. Stay
which
with your rule.
which is really fairly easy to do in one book, because if you change in the middle, you can always go back and fix the beginning of the book. But once you have a series, it's harder to stick to. But you got to do it, or else people will come back and say, wait a minute, you said in book 2. And
Yeah,
now in book 6, you've done this, which you said was not possible.
yeah.
People will come back and do it. Focus in. You're going to pay a little bit more attention to areas of culture, things like habits, courtesies, customs, values, relationships, and values. Yes, I know it's in there twice. I caught that and I left it there on purpose. Because
We could have had 2 good values and bad ones.
yeah, you can have good, what kind of thing are you willing to do? What kind of thing are you not willing to do? Do you have different values when it comes to people you know than strangers, things like that?
Yeah.
And there's a huge amount of information that you could put in here, but things like holding the door for the person behind you. Simple things that we do all the time. Is that normal in your culture? Or in the culture of your book, more accurately?
Well, or the culture of a character. You may have one character that would hold the door, and then you'd have the one that never would.
Exactly.
I mean, so that those kind of things, even between individuals in a book, can be different.
Can be varied. Yep, they can. Okay. And your character. Spend 10 to 15 minutes, not 10, 5 to 10 minutes getting to know each of your characters better. Physical descriptions are important, even if you never give them in the book. You need to know if she's 6 foot tall and can reach the top of a shelf, or if she's 4 feet tall and needs a step to a stool, or will drag a chair over. Or is that even her personality? Is she going to do that, or is she just going to do without it?
And I know I spent some time looking at this one thinking, why do we include this in the world? But then I thought, well, it does.
Well,
depending on what you're going to do in the story.
Exactly. And is that height normal for the world? So you've got a 6 foot tall person. Is everybody else 4 feet tall and she's abnormally tall, or is that normal?
Right.
So that's part of why it's in the world. It was also part of the 30 days of world building, so that's why it got included. And that may not even be your main character. You may have, for example, a race of people that's normally 6 feet tall, and you've got this one side character that's 4 feet tall.
I think it makes me think of Gulliver's Travels. Because he kept running into people of all different sizes. And stuff. Yeah.
So it makes me think of Willow. Just the halflings and all of that. That's what it made me think of.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Well, it is. I read The Sparrow a few years ago. That's a work of science fiction about this group of people that are, I think, in South or Central America, and they have this listening thing, and they hear this music. They hear this music, singing coming to them from somewhere, and so they decide to go there. Well, when they get there, the people that are there, to me, sound like they sort of look like cats, but they walk on 2 feet, and so it's like here again, where you're having, this is part of your world, the way their characters look.
Yeah. Plot hooks. What's going to keep your reader coming back for more? Is it a good character, an unexpected turn of events, suspense, and how do you plan to hook your readers in the first couple of pages? I do like the hook that is hooks hook.
Hooks hook. Yeah, they certainly had their share of hooks in that story.
They did, but just little things, and start thinking about them. There will be a little bit more on hooks here in a bit.
Yeah, we've got some more about hooks.
Another day to look at character, strengthen your character, look at your world's background and see how that works with your characters and their history. Did they lose a parent or sibling in a catastrophe or a war or something else? Often things that happen before we meet the character shape how they react to events.
And the particular visual I used here, this is from a new series that was on Amazon Prime called Hunters. They are about this group of people that are hunting leftover Nazis or maybe current Nazis. Like the couple sitting on the couch actually, had gone through the Holocaust, lost people, and the other people are just, but they're all interesting characters and what they're going on. And so I thought, they make a difference to how your world looks too. And they made a difference to how that, particularly if you ever watch it, how that particular series played.
Yep. Culture, again. What are some of the major political and social groups? Which of your groups are your characters or is your character part of? And it does not mean that they have to be one. You can have several different groups. Think Hunger Games. They were all part of different cultural groups.
Right, there were about 8 groups, if I were something like that.
Well, kind of, but there was pretty much each of the
I remember they had to send somebody from each group for their war games or whatever they were doing.
and there was 11 or 12 of them.
Is that okay? There were more. I just know there was 12 makes sense. They kind of put it like the hands of a clock in a way.
Yeah, and I want to say that in the end, the one that they escaped to that had been decimated years before was the 13th.
That could make sense too.
That's why I remember it. And what are some of the conflicts and alliances between and among the groups?
We can think about that in our own society. I mean, we have the environmentalists, and then we have the people that belong to the ASPCA, and sometimes they band together the different groups.
Yep.
And obviously some of them fit within other groups. I mean, you might, so, and obviously we know we have our political groups.
Yep.
Every if you look at some of the other countries in Europe, you find out we have 2 major parties, but in some of the other countries, they have maybe 5 or 6 that are fairly populated, and they work together sometimes. Only one will come out as the one that wins and actually can be the prime minister or whatever, but they will work together as well. So even, even just in our world, we have a lot of different political groups in different countries.
Okay, I cannot remember the name of what this was from. This was not from Hunger Games. It was from the other one with the girl from Fault in Our Stars.
Oh, are you talking about another?
This is from a book series. These people right here, the selfless, the peaceful, the honest, the image we've got here.
Was it from the Divergent series?
Divergent, that was it.
Okay. I did read them, but I didn't remember I knew there were groups, but I just didn't remember them. I was wondering where that came from. It came from
Divergent. And if you weren't one of these groups, you were Divergent.
Okay.
Okay, and I didn't read that, but I did see the movies. My teenagers did read it.
I read it. I didn't see the movies, but I did read it, but it's been a while. And I wasn't as taken with it as I was with the Hunger Games. So.
Yeah.
Which I both read and saw. So
I did. I read actually the new one, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That was really good. It was good. Plot hooks. And we catch it again. Continue working on your what ifs. Mark the ones that you plan on using for sure. And a highlighter or star beside them would be good for this. I like to make just a long list of different things that can happen. because it gives you someplace to start if you get stuck. And don't get rid of things, don't delete things, because you may get to a point and decide you want to use it.
And kind of what you're saying, you make a long list. You might want to highlight the ones you definitely know you're going to use.
Yes.
But you'll leave them on the list because maybe at some point you say, well, my story seems to be taking a turn. What would be a good what if now? Or you just need a new idea for a scene. What if can just be a scene? It doesn't have to be even a whole chapter.
It doesn't even have to be a plot line or anything. It can just be a scene. And you may not use it in this story, but if you haven't used it, or sometimes even if you have, it can be used again in another story. So I never get rid of anything. Keep it. It may be used because I've read more than a couple of books with things like car accidents, fist fights. So read about other authors' worlds. The tiniest element of another writer's creating could inspire your world, and take note of how the writer shows rather than tells elements of her world.
And this picture is from The Martian, and I think number one, I admire the author because of what he did, and the other thing is that he did it on a blog, and he had a lot of people that if stuff was wrong in his science, then they would tell him and he would change it, before he actually put it into a book. And I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, yeah, he had pretty much everything right, except maybe I think the wind. He said the part about the wind in the story probably wasn't right.
Okay, so the funniest part to me about that story is he's writing it out, and he gets these people messaging him going, okay, this is how it would work. This is off. And so he's fixing it. What he didn't realize is those were NASA scientists.
Yeah. I guess you don't know who reads your blog, although I read a comment the other day that nobody reads blogs anymore, but I don't know if that's true or not. So.
Some do. Not as many as used to, but some do still. Mood. Does the mood you chose earlier fit the other decisions you've made? Are you trying to tell a cheery story in wartime? Double check the mood will work with your other choices and change what needs to be changed. Just a chance to go over and make sure everything coordinates. Make sure that things are not dramatically out of sync here.
I think I chose this picture from Deadpool because I thought that there's a very definite mood in that story.
Who?
Dodger home run, second man up.
Wow.
So
We
yeah,
have a mood. There's a mood, I guess.
there's a mood. Yep. Okay, and plot hooks. An earthquake, a robbery, someone bursts in with a gun. Like I said earlier, it's a good idea to have a list of hooks for when things slow down. You can just pick one up and run with it. One of the well-known things about NaNoWriMo is the traveling shovel of death. So it's just something that we know is a big thing that goes around. You want to kill someone off, find a way to do it with a shovel so that it's a thing that is in Nano. Make a list of your plot hooks so that you can get an idea of when you get stuck, things that you can do.
I'm going to mention something because you talked about a shovel, and I don't know that I ever saw that before, but they have a new Fargo series. That they did make a series on Fargo for television, sometime after the movie, and the latest one is kind of a story of what's going on in Chicago in the 1950s. Not Chicago, Kansas City in the 1950s.
Okay.
And there's a kind of a conflict going on between the Italians and the blacks in the story. I mean, obviously there's other parts of Chicago that are involved as well, but this is going on. Well, and there's a scene where one of the Italian people, they're out driving along, and there's some kids out firing cap guns
Uh-huh.
and maybe guns with some other kind of projectile in them, and that one of the mafia guys, the Italian mafia guys, gets hit in the neck with this children's thing, and well, he ends up dying. He doesn't actually die from that, but that he bleeds heavily from that. He's put in the hospital, and then he's encouraged to his death by a nurse. But I thought all it was that got him was just a projectile from a kid's gun.
It's the toy gun.
Yeah.
Okay. That works.
So anything will work.
Yep.
Mood 3, by now you know what mood you want to set. You know your words, you know the color that evokes that mood. Your politics contribute to it, your plot even assists it. And if they don't, today is the day to make sure they do. And this is a scene from Hamlet where he's talking to the skull of his friend Yorick, which is a very heavy, heavy scene.
Yep. What have you left out? What have you not covered? What is the clothing of the world or period? Where do they live? What kind of house? Are they in caves? Are they in huts, mansions, stone castles? What do they eat? What kind of hygiene do they have? How often do they wash? What's the law enforcement of the world like? Things that you might not have considered previously. Now would be the time to go ahead and consider what's going on and how you're going to fill them in. This is from iRobot, isn't it?
I think so. If I recall, they've made their own robot police,
Yep.
except for Will Smith.
Yeah. Now for the anti-what if. You've gotten most of your world done. What have you not found a way to work in? What is awkward and needs to be cut? What just doesn't fit? Go ahead and go through the list of all of the stuff that you've built over the past and take a look at it and see what doesn't fit and cut what you need to. Now, like I said before, don't throw things away. You can save them for further books. Things may take a turn and you might fit it in or you might not. Don't pressure yourself by trying to fit it in.
I think another thing you have to look at quite closely at what doesn't fit is how it is your timeline. I mean, their timeline's part of your world as well, and you have to make sure that your timeline is staying straight, you know, that you're
That you
portraying
don't
it
have
correctly.
people knowing about things that haven't happened yet and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or even something happening that your reader's going to know happened 2 months ago, and you mention it somewhere and say it's 6 weeks ago. Well, you know, you've got to get it close, I think, even though a character can be wrong. You know,
Wrong. You don't want to say it happened last week.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And last is our resources. The link to the 30 days of world building that this was based on, as well as a video class from Brandon Sanderson given in his writing science fiction and fantasy class at BYU. That was his world building lecture. And I just thought it might be interesting, something you guys might enjoy. And
so
that's it for today.
That's the world for today. And next week we do inspiration, and then we're on to
On to Nano and the kickoff.
We're on to the kickoff. Yes.